Why is it that black boys are least likely to succeed in school in the UK? They're the most likely to be excluded, written off, and ultimately misunderstood. And if you're a parent of a young black boy, or even a teacher of a young black boy, and you want to understand what's going on, this video might be for you. Because this isn't just about grades in school. It's about identity. It's about the future of my brothers and sisters. So let me get into it. Now, let's start with the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. And I'm going to just have a little look at my screen here because it's not looking good. So GCSE results, right? This is for people that are getting at least 5 GCSEs. Chinese people, 80%. Indians, 73%. Bangladeshi, 62%. Black African, 54.5%. White British, 48%. Black Caribbean, 34.6%. I'm Jamaican. We are the lowest. The lowest. So Black Caribbean boys are pretty much at the bottom. Black Africans are in the middle. So even within the black community, we're still not the best, but there's even disparity within our own community, right? And obviously there's a different culture, and there's differences between Caribbeans and West Africans. And maybe that is bearing out in these numbers, which I am going to throw in my own personal opinion once we get through the data here. So we're not done. A-level results. Okay, so achieving at least 3 A grades, right? Hear this out. Chinese, 27.4%. Indian, 21%. White British, 13%. Black African, 8.6%. Black Caribbean, 4.9%. Only 1 in 20 Black Caribbean students get 3 A grades at A-level. For Chinese students, it's more than 1 in 4. We're not done. Exclusions. I'm not done because the data is going to really lay the foundations for this video. Exclusions, right? So this is permanent exclusions from school. So this is percentage rates. So for gypsies, which I didn't even know that was a race. I didn't know that was like his own race. Forgive me for being ignorant. I'm also going to link all this data in the description. So if you're wondering where did I pull these numbers from, did I pull them out my ass? No, I didn't. So gypsies, 0.4%. Irish travelers, 0.3%. Black Caribbean, 0.15%. Mixed white and black Caribbean, I don't know what that means, but 0.14%. Black African, 0.02%. Chinese, 0.01%. National average is 0.06%. Black Caribbean boys are being kicked out of school at more than double the national average. So this is basically a Black Caribbean video. This ain't even about black boys in general, because obviously we are not a monolith, and we know that. So here's what the data is telling us, right? Black Caribbean boys are consistently underachieving at every single level. We know this now. They are more likely to be excluded and less likely to achieve grades at GCSE level and A levels. And even compared to our black West African brothers and cousins, we ain't even near them. We are not near them. That is a problem. And we have to talk about why is this happening? Like, what is what's the reason? What's the causation of this? Now, I always like to kind of caveat my videos by saying I don't have all the answers, because I don't. I like to kind of riff on some of these topics and talk about them. And I have my opinion. So let's talk about why this is happening. One of the things that I think we do know is happening is, black boys are more likely to be seen as aggressive and disruptive. Research has suggested that, but also I can give you some life tells in regards to that. I remember a particular scenario when I was in secondary school, and I just moved schools. So I got excluded from another school. I moved to a new school, but it wasn't a permanent exclusion. But after I got excluded, I was like, I don't want to go back there anyway. My mum was like, cool, go to this school. Went to a different school that was a bit closer. And I had an art teacher, and for some reason, the way she would talk to me was as if she was scared of me. It was as if she was scared of me, and I felt this biasness towards me. And if you're a boy who's been in school, you know what I'm talking about. There's that biasness sometimes that they can treat you with as if you've done something wrong before you've done something wrong. And what this doesn't allow for you to actually enjoy being in the class with them. And then because they treat you that way, you do end up becoming that person, right? Outside, I'd say someone drew me out. They used to draw me out because it was like, I didn't do anything, but you're making me feel like I did something. So now I'm actually going to do something. And that I had an art teacher, and she ended up making me become aggressive because of the way she was treating me, right? So it happens. And I'm sure that, I've got loads of personal anecdotes, and I don't like to use anecdotal data, but I always sometimes felt in school that my intelligence was not respected because I was someone that questioned authority a lot. But I wasn't like there's a certain type of boy that was in school. There was like the loud, rude kids. Then there was the kids that were on the roads doing certain things, so they were just disrespectful to everybody. But I was an athlete. I played for Crystal Palace. I played sports. So my mindset was I was just opinionated because I was smart. I was intelligent. But they tried to lump me with the rude boys because I was always questioning authority, and I would do it intelligently. And I don't think, some teachers, they just didn't like that. So I don't think, so one thing here, with some of the research shows us there is teacher bias and there is low expectations for young black boys. It's pretty clear. Another thing, lack of representation and role models. And I don't really like to blame everything on that, but I can count on one finger, because it's one, black teacher I had as like someone that took my class. His name was Mr. Van Kooten. I don't know if he was Dutch because it sounds like a Dutch name, but yeah, he was the only black male teacher I ever personally had, ever. Yeah, that's X amount of years of schooling in England. He was the only black male teacher I ever had, and I lived in South London. Yeah, so there are not a lot of male teachers these days. A lot of men are not choosing to get into the education industry. I don't know why that is. Again, I don't have all the answers. But, a lot of black boys are not seeing themselves in authoritative positions. Which then leads to, I think we know where it was going with this, but the fathers. And I think we knew this was coming. But especially in black Caribbean households, fathers are just simply not as present as they need to be. Which means that we get a lot of young black Caribbean boys, and I know people are going to be in the comments, Caribbeans, what are you talking about? It could be Grenadians, Barbadians, Trinidad and Tobago. Like, let's just say Caribbean because the data doesn't separate us like that. Yeah, but there are a lot of us who didn't grow up with our dads around. Luckily for me, I did. I didn't grow up in the same house as him, but he was around. And I think, again, this is now my opinion. A lot of young black boys, they don't grow up with a male authority figure in the household, right? And whether you like it or not, there is a difference when a man says something to a child versus a woman. I don't care what anyone says. There is a slight difference. It doesn't mean that your mother cannot be authoritative and she can't put her fist down. Of course she can. But there is a difference when a man comes in the room and says, "Oi, do this," versus your mother. It's just natural. It's nothing. I'm not saying men are weak, or I'm not saying women are weak, or or men are stronger than women. It's just there's a difference, yeah. And a lot of these boys, they end up becoming the way they are because they don't listen to people. They don't really need to listen to people because they never had to. And their mum lets them get away with whatever they want. And even if their mum slaps them and she's the authority figure in the household, they leave the household. They don't listen. They don't care. So I do think that plays a crazy, crazy role. And I think that unfortunately, that's something that is a whole nother video in regards to, fatherless homes in the UK, because we know the data. We ain't got to lie about that one. Another thing is cultural disconnect. So this is a little bit kind of, I would say it's a bit more of a wishy-washy thing, but I do feel like, you go to school and you really don't ever hear anything about your history, about your past, apart from slavery. All I know, or all I was told, was basically that people came to West Africa, yeah, they enslaved them and took them on boats and took them to America, South America, the Caribbeans. That's all I pretty much know. Then, basically, the Caribbeans then went to England to help rebuild England. That's kind of all I know. That's like, and I wasn't even taught that part in school, like the bit about, Jamaicans and coming over to England. Like, I had to learn that later in life. But like in school, you don't actually get taught anything. So pretty much before slavery, you don't really know. All I know about Africa was Egyptians. All I know is that some people built pyramids, bro. Like, no one taught. I don't know anything about the tribes, the kings and queens that we had. Like, we're not taught that. And I'm not saying that, oh, in a British school, they should be teaching us that. But if we're here, someone's got to teach it. It's like, even now at this age, I should probably try and find out more about that and learn about that, right? So I do think there is like a cultural disconnect, because many black boys, yeah, they feel like they're not being taught, they're being managed. And that's a difference. There's a difference between going to school and being taught and being managed. And actually, when I say that, I really relate with that, because I feel like sometimes in school, you're not really being taught, you're just being managed. Like, yo, you're here, fucking get on with it, see you later. That's pretty much it. That is pretty much it. All right? All we see is slavery and civil rights. How many times are you going to tell me about Martin Luther King? I'm not saying I don't need to know that, but, you know, like, come on. Something happened to us before then, right? We had a good life before, right? Anyway, you get my point. So, as I look at my notes here when I wrote this video, I was just thinking that there's more, obviously, and another big part, which is the socio-economic factors, aka the invisible hand. The invisible hand, the reason we say this is because it's like factors that are not like directly related to it, but it is. And it's pretty clear, you know, because beneath all of this, there's something even more powerful that's shaping, you know, the future of our young men. Poverty. Poverty is one of them. The biggest precursor to crime is poverty. Where are a majority of young black Caribbeans? Like, where are they? Like, in terms of where they live? They usually live in more diminished neighborhoods in London, in Birmingham, in Manchester, in the big cities. You know, we are more likely to be in lower class areas. That's just the way that it has worked out to be, for whatever reason. You know, I don't know the details. I don't know who orchestrated this, right? But that's what it is. And if we talk about money, because I'm going to read some stats for you. In 2016, 28% of black Caribbean pupils were eligible for free school meals. That's double the number of white British pupils. And if you're from a low income family, that poverty touches everything. The food you eat, the sleep you get, the books you have at home, the Wi-Fi that you rely on, literally, to study. It affects how confident you feel walking into the classroom, I'm sure. And again, I was lucky. I had a good mother. My dad was involved, you know, he did his best, and I never wanted for anything, you know. I wasn't struggling to the degree of some of the other people that I know, you know, were definitely struggling. And then that kind of leads to another thing, because with the socio-economic factors, it affects your home life, right? And your home environment, and you need family support. One of the biggest things I would say, and the differences between like black Caribbean and West African families, is that, you know, firstly, they have a stronger family unit, mum and dad. And then on top of that, I think that they really do put an emphasis on education. And I see it from all my African friends. Like, they will say it all the time, you know, their mum and dad are on them to go to school, graduate, do this, do that, be a doctor, blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong, black Caribbean families want that too. But I think that just maybe culturally, West Africans have a stronger push to make their kids want to do that, and kind of not force it upon them, because then some of them become rebellious. But I do feel like there's a bit more of a drive to get there for them. And then obviously I've got Indian friends, and I ain't got any Chinese friends, but I know Chinese people, and I always feel like they have a more kind of uniform approach to like schooling and family. It's like, yo, do this, get good, you know, get good grades, make money. Like they really have an emphasis on that. Is it a cultural thing? Was it designed that way? I don't know. But, you know, with the home environment, because of black people being in these low income places, you know, your mum and dad's working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. There's no one checking your homework. There's no one explaining exams and your timetables. To a degree, some of these kids, they don't even get asked how their day's been at school. And that's just the reality of life for a lot of people that especially are in low income households. That is their reality. And all of that can literally make a difference to how engaged a student is. And then there's obviously the school factor. So remember I said socioeconomic factors here, right? And a lot of black Caribbean boys are in low income areas. And then they go to schools that are in low income areas, and these schools are deprived. Some of them are deprived of the right facilities. They do not have all the needs to cater for the kids that go to the school. Like, the truth is, not all schools are created equal. That's just the way life is. And then obviously you're expected to compete with other kids who potentially, they got private tutors, they got better schools, so on and so forth, of course their economic opportunities are going to be, wider. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Now, I'm not a fatalistic person, so I do believe everyone has a possibility to move up the social ladder. There is social mobility. Now, social mobility is not, I think it's decreased a lot over the last 10, 15 years. But, I am not a fatalistic person. So I always tell people, look, you got to save yourself. And then there is the neighborhood influence. So if we stick with this socioeconomic factor and we think about it, deprived areas, what happens in deprived areas? We have crime. Everyone likes to talk about knife crime, black on black crime. I hate these terms, but some of it is real. We can't deny it. So bad areas, poor areas, of course, crime. So then we've got these kids that don't have dads at home. And guess what? The streets become their dad. Yeah, the roads become their dad. I've seen it millions of times. I've got friends in certain places. It happens. Yeah. And I'm not just blaming dads, by the way, but men, mainly men that kind of play a big part in this. And with that being said, the environment you are raised in matters. If you're in an area with high unemployment, high crime, underfunded services, how can it not affect your aspiration? It's just a natural thing. It's going to affect your aspiration because you're a human being and you're socialized and your environment affects you. It doesn't matter who you think you are, especially as a kid, you're impressionable. It affects you. So if you're seeing certain things all the time, drug dealers, people sleeping on the streets, even like the roads just being messy. Like I remember I drove back to my old area the other day and I was just like, wow, the roads are so messy here. There's trash everywhere. Obviously now I live in Kent and it's just quiet and the roads are clean. And I'm like, obviously certain parts of Kent are pretty bad too. But like I was in London, I was like, right, it's so dirty. How are they allowing this? But anyway, I dissect. Your environment is going to obviously affect you. And then we've got the intersection of race and class. Now, combine all of that with being a young black boy in a country where people already expect a little less of you. I'm the last person that will pull the race card in most scenarios, just because I do believe hard work trumps everything. But sometimes, we are told you got to work twice as hard. I think that's every black person on this planet has probably been told that kind of line. You got to work twice as hard to get just as much. And I actually think that that's not a bad mentality to have because that means I've got to go double hard and I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that. I can only play the cards I have been dealt, right? But with that being said, these kids are not just facing poverty. They're facing poverty layered with racial bias. So exclusion rates, low achievement, lack of progression. It's not just about bad behavior or effort. It's about systems that are ultimately failing. These systems are failing these boys and kids, right? Because black boys are not inherently stupid. Like, you can't tell me a black Caribbean kid is just inherently stupid compared to a Chinese kid or an Indian kid. It just doesn't, if there is any factual research that studies brains and just automatically assigns that black Caribbean boys have low IQ, I'm so open to reading it. Please send it over. Because I don't think that's the case, right? I would love for you guys to comment below and tell me any kind of personal stories you guys have had with being mistreated in school. You don't have to be a black boy to give me that information. I'd love to know because I know that some of these experiences were not just me, Even things like fucking walking into a shop. These things happen. But I don't like to be a pessimist. I want to talk about how we can fix this. Can it be fixed? Is it possible to be fixed? I will give my opinion and I've got some notes here. So if you see me look down, that's why. First things first, cultural training. I think every teacher should be, given some cultural training. They should be taught how to handle multiple cultures. That's what I think, me personally. We need more male black educators. This obviously is going to be harder to do and implement, but how can we get more black men into teaching? Because if you do that, it's going to have a positive effect. And I'm not saying to replace every white teacher or every Indian teacher or whatever, but I'm saying there must be a way for us to get more black men into teaching. How can we make that profession more viable? I could probably think of some reasons why a lot of teachers aren't paid what they should be paid in the UK. So a lot of black men probably look at that profession and well, why the hell would I want to do that? It's not making me enough money. I don't fault you for that. So how can we make it more attractive. That's basically what I'm trying to think. Obviously, community mentorship. Young black boys need mentorship. They need help. They need support. Especially as we know, there are not enough, our fatherless home rate is too high, especially in the Black Caribbean community. So if we know this, the only way for us to effectively combat that is by having some type of system or something in place that can allow them to see black men as an authority and have, or just have an authoritative black figure in their lives. I'm not saying that they've got to have someone that, is a boss to them or whatever, but they've got to see that, because representation matters and it allows you to kind of identify, which, is important. I think that there should also be a little bit of a curriculum reform. I'm not saying it to change everything that they teach in history and stuff, but is there any way that they can actually just include a bit more black history? Or maybe they can separate classes a little bit and have the black people and black kids learn a bit more about life before they came to West Africa and took people in boats. Because I know that there was life and there was stuff that was happening in Africa well before then. We know that, but they don't teach that. So can we just add it to the curriculum that, this is what happened? Apart from the Egyptians and the pyramids, bro, because there was more than just pyramids. Like, come on, man. You guys are killing me with this. And then, we got to start early. We got to identify the kids before they get to secondary school very, very early. Identify them. The ones that are struggling emotionally, socially, academically. Now, obviously, all of this costs money. And does the government give a crap about us? Boy, I'm not a politician, but you guys, I know what you guys will think, and I know what I think. So there are other cultures that are winning. So why are they winning and not us? Mainly the Asian cultures, Chinese and Indians from the data, right? And we got to think what's working. For them, there is high priority on academic success. There is strong cultural pressure around education, discipline, and family honor. We don't need to copy them, but we can learn from their values. Pride in education, community accountability, structured support. Can we bring that into our community? One thing as well is their fatherless home rates are lower than ours. Lower than ours, right? So because of that, they've got strong men in the house telling them, you need to be doing this, because I'm the boss around here. And young boys need that. They need the boss. So how can we bring that? I think it's kind of misguided to say that Black Caribbean families don't care about education. Maybe there is less pressure on that, and that might be a cultural thing. I can't say that for me, but I definitely think there's a difference. And I think it is more down to the family ties, if I'm being honest. So we can look at the other cultures and see, like, why are they winning? There's a reason they're winning. It's simple, some of those things I mentioned. It's simple. So look, this video is not just kind of, it's a message here. If you're a black boy, you're more than a statistic. You're more than just a number, as much as you may feel that way. Or if you're a parent or a teacher, how can you positively make change? This video is to provoke conversation. I do not have all the answers. I can only present what I think and what I feel. And I like to talk, so it's good to have a little chat every now and then. I would love for you guys to drop a comment, share a story, tag someone who needs to see this, because if we don't change the narrative, who will? All the data is in the description if you want to have a read. Peace.